horticulture course in North Carolina. He then completed an internship in England, becoming familiar with a wide variety of plants. After returning to the U.S., he moved around the country, earning his living as a waiter as well as working for several landscape designers. He finally moved to upstate New York, began a garden design business, and settled into his mountain retreat in the Catskills.
I fell in love with it right away when I drove into the driveway and saw the little cottage and stepped into the kitchen and saw the porcelain sink and the screened porch and all of it. I knew I was home and really feeling at home because I had really been this kind of vagabond for a few years and I wanted to stay put.
This pairing of datura, or angel's trumpet, and Mexican sunflower makes me think of the South.
Well, the Mexican sunflower definitely makes me think of the South. I used to see that out of the window of an apartment building in Atlanta, and I didn't know it. This was years ago, and I thought, I'm going to have that plant one of these days. The datura, I don't know that I knew it from the South. I grew it in this garden the first year, 8 years ago, and I don't think I've had it back until this year. But it's a great plant, an annual for us. You know, it's an interesting plant. I mean, the first year I had it in these inner beds and it made this sprawling sort of shrubby thing, but here I've clipped it out of the way a bit and it's kind of forced it to go up into the, so it's almost viney. I mean, you can see how tall it's gotten. Yeah, it's a wonderful annual. Opens early evening, and I find that's when it's the most fragrant.
And this little fuzzy creature,
That's Kochia. I don't know the species name of that plant.
it just feels so good.
Yeah, isn't it? And I've had it before and planted it as a little annual transplant for the summer, and it never did much. But these actually volunteered from seed this spring, and they're all around the garden, and they've been so vigorous. This goes like a kind of cranberry red in the fall. So it's nice now, but in the fall it really has its moment.
This poppy is so delicate. Is there a name of that variety?
Yeah, this strain or variety is called Angel Wing. I got them years ago in the garden, and since then they've volunteered. It's developed from the classic red corn poppy from France, Papaver roeus, and this is a pastel strain that was developed. And so I never know quite what I'm going to get. This was a late volunteer. Normally this kind of poppy, as you know, would not be this fresh and floriferous in August, but this was a late volunteer, and I've kept it dead-headed, and it just seems happy as it can be right in front of this Kochia.
Dean, you've got this lovely little picture frame looking right into the garden.
Yeah, the arbors, or the bean pyramids, I call them. You know, they're these opposing pairs, and they anchor the corners of these beds. And didn't think of it the first year, but second year I put the stick across. I was like, oh, duh. And it made this nice arbor and framed the chair, and then on that side, of course, it frames the bird bath and the little planter hanging there.
Tell us about this fence.
Okay, the fence, I built myself, every stick, every nail. I saw a fence years ago my friends built in Virginia and around their vegetable garden, and I just loved it the moment I saw it. And when I came around to making this garden, it just seemed like the time and place to do it. So I laid the garden out, I dug up the plot, and I put the post and rails up, and then I started actually attaching the sticks the next spring, but I didn't know where they were going to come from. I started noticing these piles of sticks on the roadsides because that's how they maintain. Of course, they just cut saplings down and they pile them up and they come along with a chipper. But I thought, that'll get me started, so I started collecting sticks, and it's a good thing. That really became my source completely. Even so, even having them laying there to collect, it still was a lot of work cutting them and trimming them, and yeah, it ended up being about 500 or 600 saplings.
500 or 600?
By the time it was all done, yeah. And it's mostly ash, which just happened to be available, and also I found out right away was easy to work with. And they took the sticks took a nail well, and it all just worked out. And it's a good thing because the ash wound up being really durable compared with some of the other stuff like maple and other things. It's really held up pretty well.
This Spring begins at the Flower Garden and Outdoor Living Show. Celebrate the wonders of New Jersey as you stroll through 14 enchanting gardens. Explore 120,000 square feet of outdoor living paradise full of inspiring ideas, experienced professionals, and thousands of blooming plants and flowers. Watch live demos and get how-to advice at informative seminars. Escape winter at the Flower Garden and Outdoor Living Show, sponsored by Clayton Block, February 20th through 23rd at the New Jersey Convention Center in Edison.
In addition to tending his garden in upstate New York, Dean Riddle also has a career writing about gardens, including a regular column titled Dean's Dirt for a popular home decorating magazine.
It's a fun column. It's one-page sort of sound bites on a topic for that particular issue. And I've been doing that now for 3 years, and increasingly I've been choosing the topics myself and kind of really have defined the page and made it my own, and I think I have a pretty good readership. Erica, that's, I'm sure of course you know Boxwood, but that's one of the Sheraton hybrids. That particular one is called Winter Gem, I believe. There's several cultivars. There's a beautiful one called Green Mountain that has a more pyramidal shape, but that one makes a nice globe shape or mound.
It's called what?
Winter Gem.
Winter.
I
So it's
think.
Buxus sempervirens.
It's Buxus. I believe it's a hybrid of sempervirens and Coriana. Anyway, it's a Sheraton hybrid, and this is great news for northeastern gardeners especially, because they're extremely hardy. That real velvety emerald green is nice with these purple petunias I'm growing for the first time.
They're just glowing with this
I know,
gumfrina.
Yeah. The gumfrina, I think this one's called Magenta Buddy, this globe
Right.
amaranth. This petunia I just came across at a local garden center back in May and grabbed 6 or 8 of them and put them around in these inner beds. This one, it's called Marco Polo Traveler. And the scent, like a lot of petunias, is just wonderful at dusk and then on into the evening, just really spicy and lovely.
Dean, we're in Zone 4. Is that right?
That's right, Zone 4.
Upstate New York.
Slightly Zone 5.
So you get snow here.
Oh yeah, we haven't the last couple of winters, but we can get major snow. It's been hip deep before, and
Covering up your hedge here.
well, in this case the hedge is young, so it's only been buried maybe a foot, if I remember right.
But this is an easy hedge to grow. This is just privet, but it's a special kind of privet that's hardy here.
It's a selection or a cultivar called Amur River, and it's meant to be particularly hardy for the Northeast, and it has been for me.
Dean, the stone here is a great way to create a patio and to have a wonderful surface to display your plants.
It really transformed this garden. It's given it this heft and solidity, you know, it really. And it's also really enlarged the garden, because before, things couldn't spill over as gracefully because of the grass growing up into it, and now the garden can just come right into the floor. And I've also started planting right in the floor, as you see. This Salvia lubeca and heavy metal, panicum heavy metal.
I like that panicum.
So it really brings the garden right into the floor.
That Nicotiana, what is that variety?
That one's called Domino Lime.
That's just beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And
It looks good with coreopsis.
it looks good with everything, I think. I like these creamy greens and off-whites, muddy whites. Even the Astrantia is not a real clean white, because the flower parts in there sort of take the edge off that. And the Ami green mist there is a
And
white.
perilla for you looks so elegant. For us, it can be quite perilla the pest.
Oh, really? Well, I do have to thin pretty, I have to really be on it in springtime, but it's so obvious that it is perilla, you know, when it comes up. It's not like you can mistake it for something else, and it's easy enough to pull out. And I love volunteer plants like the verbena. I'd rather pull a few of those out than like go buy dozens of them and dig holes. When I've made this garden, I wanted it to be sort of low maintenance, because I have another garden that's very labor intensive, but that's not what happened. And that's really not gardening for me anyway. I like to be hands-on constantly. I'm utterly obsessed with it. I want my garden to engage me all the time.
And it does.
And it does, every nook and cranny of it, all times of the year, every moment of the day. I wake up with it, I go to bed with it, whether I'm actually working in it or not.
In the Catskill Mountains in upstate New York, Dean Riddle is constantly refining his personal garden.
This is a brand new garden here for all these years. I've had nothing here. It was just grass right up to the house, and that was fine. And I used to pile my tools and things over here, but I just longed for something to connect the house with the main garden. And so last fall, I made the beds, the raised beds. But from the time I made the beds almost, I knew that at least this first year I wanted to plant these cut and come again zinnias. Because I went out to Nantucket last summer to do a story, and when we walked into the garden at 5 o'clock on this gorgeous afternoon, she had this great long, she called it a zinnia hedge of this cut and come again zinnia. It's just this image that stayed with me all winter, and I just thought I'm going to have those zinnias. I've grown other varieties of zinnia, but never this one, and so it worked. I have this wonderful memory of my mother's one visit to the garden. She died a couple of years ago, but the very first year of the garden, 8 years ago now, she and my dad came up with 2 of my siblings, and they got here late afternoon one day. It was September. The zinnias in the main garden I had that year was a variety called State Fair Mixed, tall and similar colors, but different too. And she got round to the back of the fence, and she saw those zinnias sticking out, and she said, "My Lord, he's got old maids in the garden." And I said, "Mom, what are you talking about? Those are zinnias." She said, "Oh, honey, I know they're zinnias, but we always called them old maids when I was a girl."
Well, it's that association. That's
Yeah,
so nice.
so that's another wonderful thing about having these zinnias this year is,
Some of your
yeah,
mother.
it just evokes that memory of my mom. You know, one of the common names of zinnias, these tall zinnias, which this is a form of Zinnia elegans,
Right.
is youth and old age, which I guess sort of is because of the fact that you have the young flowers with the old flowers on the same plant. Because
Sure.
as they fade even, they stay so nice. And I even like the faded ones. I mean, this is a lovely color here, this sort of,
Apricot.
oh, it's just lovely, isn't it? And see, there's the faded one, and it's almost even more lovely when this gets tinged with this, just so pretty. But I've taken to calling this border Mexico because
It's so
it just
colorful.
occurred to me one day, the colors, and Zinnia elegans, as I said, which this variety is developed from, is native to Mexico. I've got this geranium, the cultivar name on this pelargonium rather eludes me right now, but it's in a pot that I found a couple of years ago, a round terracotta pot from Mexico. But I don't know, the colors and the zinnias, so Mexico. I think that there is tremendous power in gardens in our very, very troubled world to help restore balance and reconnect people to the physical world. It really is just in a class by itself. There is nothing like it.
Celebrate the Big Apple with a tour of 7 high-profile homes on our special New York Uptown and Down today at 5 Eastern on HGTV.